Hello and welcome to the Light and Energy Show with me, Claire Wiles. Today's show is all about the tarot, and I'm sure lots of you watching out there will have had your tarot cards read in the past. I have many times if there's been perhaps difficulties in your life and you're looking for somebody to give you the answers. And we're joined today by Garry Andrews, who's a very experienced tarot reader, and he's going to explain a lot more to us about the significance of the tarot and how we might use it for our own benefit. Welcome, Garry, to the show. So tarot's very interesting. How did you get into using tarot cards?
A long time ago, when I was 11.
Wow.
This is actually the cards. They were my 11th birthday present, so I still use them today. It's the only ones I can use, to be honest. They were bought for me by my mother on my 11th birthday, so that started me off. I don't suppose I really got involved in using them until I was probably about 15, 16, somewhere around there. And not seriously then until I was in my 20s. But I've owned them since I was 11.
That's amazing for a child in the early 70s, a boy in the early 70s, to be using tarot cards was quite unusual, I would think.
Yeah, quite unusual. Yeah, certainly I think the influence for that comes from my mother. She was quite keen on spiritualism and so on and so forth. Right. And we've got other family members that do bits and pieces along the sort of a psychic line. So so there was no great surprise when I asked for those for my birthday, really, and she went out and got them. And
do you do lots of readings for people, or have you done lots of readings for people over the years?
Used to do a lot. Now my work is mainly doing the healing stuff, the massage work, and the door method and stuff along those lines. But I do still do read for people if they ask me to. The focus where the tarot is concerned for me now at the moment is in teaching the tarot course and in writing the book.
And I've actually taken part in both your beginners and intermediate tarot course, and it is absolutely brilliant, and you put it across in a way that's so easy for people to understand. So it'd be great when the book comes out and then everybody can use it. You're going to tell us a little bit about the history of the tarot, aren't you, and show us some unusual tarot cards and how they've changed over the years?
I am. I'm not going to talk too much about the history because, to be fair, I don't know a lot about it, and the reason for that is it doesn't interest me. As far as I'm aware, the history of the tarot we can only get back to about the early 15th century, I think, 1500s, in Italy, where that's as far as we can actually physically trace the history. Of course, beyond that there is the theories. They came from Egypt, they came from Romania with the gypsies, they're a sacred book, etc., etc., etc. But none of that can actually be proven. The only thing we can prove is they appeared sometime in Renaissance Italy. Beyond that, we can't go any further. So for me, I'm sure there are people out there that love the history of the tarot. I'm not one of them. It all seems a bit dry to me, a bit dry and a bit dead. I'm more interested in what the tarot means to us today, and what it can do for you or me or anybody today.
So that using of ancient wisdom within today's lifestyle, because what we're going to be using divination tools for in this time is going to be very different perhaps than people used it in times gone by.
Of course it is, yes. I mean, if you imagine the old shaman with his bones, his main concern was maybe the hunt, or where to gather the next few berries from the tree. Today that is not what our focus would be on. Our focus might be more on our job, for instance, which is the hunt, if you like. That's the modern
good comparison.
Way of hunting. We go out to work.
Yes, absolutely.
So we would be concerned with the hunt. So although there is a difference in what we are concerned about, the essence of that is actually the same. We're concerned about our security, our safety, and survival, really. We just look at it in a much more modern way. And the tarot is a lovely tool for doing that.
Great.
It moves through.
So we're going to have a look now at some of the perhaps more unusual tarot cards, or look at how they've changed over the years.
How they've changed over the years, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
So Gary, you brought in just some of your vast collection of tarot cards for us to have a look at today. Thanks ever so much for bringing them in.
Pleasure.
So which are the earliest, or copies of the earliest tarot cards that you've got here on the table?
These would be copies of the earliest ones I have. They are not original early tarot cards. I don't own any. They occasionally come up in auction, but they're usually very expensive. But these would be sort of like a earliest version that I've got, and as you can see, they tend to be quite stylized and just have a number of swords or a number of cups on them, much like a deck of playing cards, modern everyday playing cards, but have 7 hearts, etc. Rather than the 7 cups.
Yeah, this one here.
Yeah,
you can have a look at as well.
Another good example would be the pentacles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of there. And then we come forward in time from there to a point where people tended to have, well, actually it was Waite, Arthur Edward Waite. He, I think, was the first person to put a design, a picture on every single card rather than just 7 cups. Or
so is he linked to the Rider-Waite?
The Rider-Waite deck,
right.
yes. Him and Pamela Coleman-Smith, who was the artist of the Rider-Waite deck. And that actually is the deck that I use to read with.
Right.
So I'm quite biased. A lot of people, I guess this deck is kind of the ABBA of tarot.
Okay.
It's the deck a lot of people love to hate because it's so popular, but the truth is everybody loves it.
Right.
It's a really good deck to read.
This is the one that you teach people to read tarot with.
Yeah. As a beginner's deck, it's brilliant. I love it. I think it is probably the easiest deck to read with. Going. I think it was 1909 when these were created, but please don't pick me up on dates because I'm not good with dates. And if I'm out by 10 years, then I'm out by 10 years. Again, history, I'm not bothered. That's the Rider-Waite deck.
And they are absolutely
tiny tarot, yes.
These little tiny cards. I mean, they're minute, aren't they? For a little girl, I mean, little doll's house tarot cards, they're amazing.
They are very small.
These are actually called Tiny Tarot,
Tiny
I believe.
Rider-Waite again, though.
I might need my glasses on to look at these now at my age. But absolutely beautiful little tiny pictures, wonderful.
Yeah, really good.
And these are based on the Rider-Waite as well.
Definitely, yes, Rider-Waite deck. Yeah.
Lovely.
And Rider-Waite is one of the decks typically that because it's popular you can get in virtually any size, from really, really tiny through to this smaller travel size deck, through to my deck, which is sort of a normal size deck, through to giant, which are about this big.
Really?
Yeah, so you can get quite a varied size of deck.
It'll be quite hard to shuffle the very large ones,
It is, but they're great for teaching with, though.
Excellent,
brilliant for
of
teaching
course.
with. Yeah. Then we move into these. These are Aleister Crowley's deck. Lots of tarot enthusiasts really love this deck. I'm not keen. I like the artwork. I think the artwork is impressive. I just don't like the feel of these particularly.
They're very different from the Rider-Waite,
they are,
aren't they? Very different.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this one here with the cups.
Yeah.
Very different.
I mean, a popular deck, and I'm not knocking it as a deck. I mean, it is beautiful. Some of the art is truly stunning. But the feel for me, I just don't like the feel of them.
So you mentioned the feel. Is it important if somebody's choosing a deck of tarot that it actually feels right for them to use?
Really important. You'll have lots of legends about, tarot cards must be bought for you, they must be handed down to you. No, buy your own deck. Go out and choose. Today there are so many different decks. You can find a deck that suits your personality, your love of colour or dislike of colour, whichever suits you. And use the ones that you're drawn to. For me, as much as I appreciate the artwork, they don't draw me as a deck I would particularly read with. So no, I wouldn't use them.
No, but as you say, very interesting pictures.
They are. And I think we could also just point out, while we've got those cards, is to think about the backs. Now, I personally think the back of a tarot card is almost as important as the front.
Right.
Because your client's first of all, see the back most of the time, and you spend most of your time looking at the back when you're shuffling and
Yeah.
you know, moving them around and everything. So a nice back design for me is quite important. I'm sure there are other tarot readers who like a plain back, but I quite like a nice design on the back. I think it's quite important.
Yes, I like the back of the...
So we move from there. Now these are early 70s, and I think it is so blatantly obvious in
absolutely.
the design of
They're
these.
real archetypal early 70s, aren't
early
they?
70s.
Yeah.
Plain backed, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
You know, just a plain back, but really very, very blatantly from the early 70s. If you look at the deck next to is late 70s, and I still think you can see a connection in the colour.
Yeah.
That's the Morgan Greer deck, and it is actually a sort of clone deck of the Rider-Waite, really, but more modern.
Right.
Brought up to a more modern, well, 70s now, but more modern at the time. But yes, but the colouring, I think, is very similar. You can see, I think you can, through tarot, I think you can definitely see the decades moving forward, if you like, you know, and it shows in the art and in the design, which is another interesting thing about the tarot cards.
Isn't it? Yeah.
They say something about life, about you know, the decade they were created in. These, for instance, are a late 80s deck, and although the colouring is very bright still, very cartoony. They've got a real 80s cartoon feel.
They have, haven't they? Yeah. Lovely pictures.
Yeah, they are really, really good, but really cartoon in appearance and in feel. It could be something off of like the X-Men or that sort of, you know, feel to them. And then of course you've got decks that are based around a theme deck. So, for instance, these ones, these are very pagan. They have a very pagan feel to them, and the imagery is very pagan.
I love these. I love the simplicity.
They are simply drawn. They are simply drawn. There's a definite feel of the old faith, the old religion, of witchcraft, etc.
Yeah.
And they are actually called the Tarot of the Old Path. So you can see how they are themed to suit a particular. Maybe a particular type of person, maybe somebody who is a pagan, for instance. And again, the backs show that with lots of naturey, planty feel to them.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
And then finally, with the cards I brought you, with them ultra modern. Now these bring us into the noughties, if you like, into our the you know 2000s and on, computer generated. Well, no, not computer generated. That's a lie. This person is a computer artist.
Right.
So he uses the computer to create the art for his tarot decks. I own everything this guy's ever done because I think he's genius. I love the art on these. They're just beautiful. His name is Ciro Machete. I think he might be Italian American. I'm not entirely sure, but his art is just beautiful. He's done about 4 tarot decks now, I think. Each one getting better with the symbolism, I believe.
Yeah.
These are one of the later ones, and they are quite stunning.
Each tarot card really is just it's such an art form in itself,
Definitely,
isn't it? The picture, the representation that somebody's managed to create from their own imagination, inspiration, guidance, whatever you want to call it, are absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, really stunning. I mean, they are works of art. There is no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
You know, and beautiful in their own right. Each one, every single tarot deck has some merit in it, without a doubt. For reading purposes, however, for me, I have to use my Rider-Waite ones, unless I'm reading for myself. And if I'm reading for myself, I will use any deck that I'm not familiar with.
So you think it's okay for people to read for themselves?
I do, but I think the problem lies in not being able to take your own slant on things out of the reading. You tend to colour, so you will see what you want to see. Hence why I will use a deck I am not familiar with, so that I have no obvious instant connection to a card, and I've got to work at it. That for me helps me separate my desire from what I'm seeing in the cards.
So you can see a clearer picture.
Yeah. I prefer to go to somebody and have a tarot reading. Would prefer to do that, but if I can't do that and I need to read for myself, then I'll just pick a deck, any deck. That sound like Paul Daniels, doesn't it? Pick a deck that I'm not familiar with, and I will do a reading for myself from those.
That's amazing. As I say, a small part of your huge collection, so thanks ever so much for bringing those in. So after the break, we're going to look at the major and the minor arcana, and some of the cards in the major arcana that people may think could be deemed as negative or could be deemed as positive, and you're going to shed some light on that for us.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So join us after the break. Hello and welcome back. I'm joined today by Garry Andrews, and we're looking at the tarot. Very interesting subject, and you're going to tell us now, Garry, aren't you, a little bit about the difference in the pack of the tarot. How many cards are there in a traditional tarot pack?
Traditionally there are 78, however there are decks out there with more cards in. You can see in some decks an extra palace card. Certainly the modern Ciro Machete deck has an extra palace card, so for each suit there is also a palace.
Okay, so let's look at the suits to start with.
Okay.
So there's 4 suits.
Let's start by saying there are 78 cards which split into 2 distinct decks.
Right.
Let's look at it that way. So you've got the minor arcana deck, if you like, which consists of swords, wands, cups and pentacles, usually, though not always. Okay. Sometimes wands can be called staves or clubs. And with the very, very modern takes on the decks, they can give them very different names. You know, like the Tower of the Vampires, for instance, I don't think has the traditional swords, wands, pentacles and cups. So, but traditionally these would be the 4 suits, and you can liken those to the 4 suits in a deck of playing cards if you like. You know, diamonds, hearts, clubs and spades. Same thing. They contain extra court cards, however. In the traditional pack of playing cards you've got the Jack, Queen and King. In the suits of the tarot you've got the Page, Knight, Queen and King. Okay. So there's 4
a king
traditionally. 4 traditional court cards instead of the traditional 3, and of course in some decks if you've got the extra deck, the Palace as well, then you've got 5.
An extra one on the top.
Another one on top of that. So that's the first deck, the minor arcana, made up of 56 cards, and then you've got the major arcana, which I guess is the one that everybody's seen usually in the horror films. Okay. This will be the deck, this will be the cards that people get to see, really. These contain the big archetypal images, really. But I don't want to get bogged down in archetypes and spiritual development and so on and so forth, which of course the tarot can be used for, but my main interest is in the use of it for divination, and that's what we'll be talking about, I hope.
So with each of these 4 suits, for want of a better word here, what's the meaning for each of those, the rough overview meaning for swords, wands, cups,
each
pentacles?
of the suits in the minor arcana basically represent an area of your life. Right. So for instance, cups tend to deal with matters of the emotions, and usually, I have to say, the good feelings. Yes. Pentacles tend to deal with things of a financial nature, things about stability and growth, all tends to come through in the pentacle deck. Wands tends to deal with action, so work, the actual doing of work would be covered by the wands deck. They also represent intuition as well, wands. But yeah, think of it as mainly as dealing with the area of your work. Okay. Swords, these are the more tricky ones. They tend to deal with matters of the mind, so thoughts rather than feelings, and they also tend to show the more negative emotions. I've found, in any case. I'm sure there'll be tarot readers out there who don't agree, but for me, if negative emotions are coming up, it tends to show in the swords rather than in the cups.
Yes.
And I equate that really by, if you look at how you feel, joyful, happy emotions, you tend to feel them here. Whereas the more negative emotions, they tend to weigh you down here and come down on you from your head. And the swords represent the mind. So for me it makes sense that they would also represent the more negative emotions. So they deal with sort of like the mundane aspect of life, if you like, the minor arcana. And then the major cards, they tend to deal with much bigger issues.
Right.
So the more spiritual issues and big events that are going on in a person's life from a divination point of view in any case.
So if during a reading some of these cards come up, then you know that's fairly large happenings.
Yeah,
when
I'm doing a reading, I tend to look as first thing I look for is an overview. What elements? So each of these minor arcana cards represent an element. I should also say that one of the traditional elements. So wands would represent fire, cups water, pentacles earth, and swords air. The four traditional elements that everything was actually based on up until very recently. Science was based on it, medicine was certainly based on it. It was the way we looked at the universe through those four elements and how they interrelated. I still do the same with my tarot, and it's certainly how I teach I teach the tarot based, as you know, around the elements. For me it's really important. So these four elements and how they interact, I would look for first in a reading which element is dominant.
Right.
So what area of the life am I really looking at? And then the major arcana cards, if there was an over flow of those, if there's far too many of those in a reading, then I know that I would be dealing with very serious issues. With lots and lots of major arcana cards coming through.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how we work on.
So some of these major arcana cards, oftentimes if people perhaps have them in a reading, they might see them as being very negative. Let's have a look here at death, the death card. So what does the death card represent?
Certainly not physical death. Again, this comes through from film, horror films particularly. You'll see the gypsy will pull the death card out, and 10 minutes later the poor woman's hung from a tree or strangled or whatever.
Someone's murdered and the death card is lying on them.
That's right. No, it doesn't mean physical death. This card is a card. It can be a difficult card. I'm not saying it can't have a difficult edge to it, because it can, because it's a card of transformation, of change. And some people don't like change. If this card comes up in a reading, I always advise the client not to fight the change. Go with the flow. If you go with the flow, this is going to be a much less painful experience. Change is coming in any case. And if you think about it, Claire, life is change.
It is. Nothing is ever constant.
No. Constant change. And it's in going with the changes, it will make the experience much less painful. And I personally believe that's what divination is all about. It's helping people go with the flow, moving with the changes that maybe are right for them, and avoiding the changes maybe that aren't right for them. If you look at it as a huge web with all these possible paths, divination can help you take the right path.
So it's looking at the possibilities.
Looking at the
helping
possibilities.
to guide you.
Yeah.
So we've got there the death card. The Hanged Man, there's another card that sometimes could be deemed as negative. What does the Hanged Man mean?
Bear in mind that this is the meanings I'm giving you here are what I feel about the card. Every tarot reader will have a different take, a different view. And nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's how the cards speak to you, which again is an important thing that I teach, how the cards speak to you. For me, this one is interesting because it doesn't have an awful lot of symbolism actually on the card. There's not a lot going on. There's just a guy hung on a tree.
Yeah.
What I found interesting when I studied this card is, for me, it looks as if he is forming the symbol for Jupiter.
Oh, right.
Kind of, with his leg. Now, for me, Jupiter is a planet of expansion and growth. And then when you look that he's got this halo around his head, this would say to me that this is about growth either spiritually or mentally. So for me, this is a great card, not at all a negative card. This is a card of expansion, of growth, and of inner growth, and spiritual and emotional growth.
So moving away from the ties that bind you, perhaps?
Yeah, that's another good way of looking at it. Yes, brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we've got the devil.
Ah, my old
Handsome
friend.
fellow.
Yeah. Again, not as awful as it might first appear. Yes, it can be a card of bondage and restriction, which I think it is. But for me, this is a card of self-imposed bondage, self-imposed restriction that can easily be overcome. You know, if you put in the right sort of work. So again, yes, it's got a negative connotation, but it isn't necessarily an evil or negative card. It's how you respond to the situation, really. So yeah. And
then the other one that we wanted to talk about here is the Tower.
The Tower, again, people always think, oh my God, you know, is my house going to burn down? That's the fifth times I've... No. It can be a card of destruction. I'm not saying that it isn't, and that maybe sometimes things have to be pulled down in order for something fresh and new to be built up. So, yes, there is an element of destruction in this card, an element of loss, but it's in order to create something better. The Tower comes down in order to build a better tower or something new. So again, not a bad card if you look at it in the right way.
Absolutely.
If you look at all these cards in the wrong way, even what might be considered positive cards, then they can have a negative feel.
So let's have a look at some of these positive cards then, or deemed positive. The Wheel of Fortune.
That's an in-between card.
Okay.
Neither positive. If you want to look at it like this, it's neither positive nor negative because it's a Wheel of Fortune. Luck could go either way.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah? So it's very much, again, a card of change and of movement, but in which way? Now, I would look to the cards surrounding it to tell me what was going on.
So in a layout, the cards that might be initial or around the outside of this card.
Yeah, or connected to it in some way. I would allow my intuition to lead me. Very much a card of change, though, but whether it's positive or negative, that's yet to be seen. I would like to bring up, if I could, this one. This is an interesting card for me. If you look at the angel, she's got 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on the land, which for me is a card of balance, of balancing out the stability with the fluidity, the emotions with solid stability and grounded fact. And also there's a path. And if you look very closely at the sparkling mountain in the background, there's actually a crown shining in that light.
Yes.
Can you see it?
I can.
Now, it's interesting. Sometimes I feel that the client, if I'm reading, is heading towards that crown. And sometimes I don't. I feel like they haven't even seen the road, if that makes sense. Yeah. So this is an interesting card. I feel, in any case for me, it's a card of balance, definitely, and of seeking the balance, or is it a card that the person's already found that balance? It depends. It's client to client.
Yes.
Whether it's they've got the balance or they're still seeking it or they haven't even seen the road yet. So this is very much a card you can use to point a person in a certain direction.
And it's interesting what you were saying about looking into the card. A lot of times people might look at the main picture in the card or the main figure in the centre of a card, and it's important to look at what else is in the card to work with.
Yeah, that's why I like the Rider-Waite, because although it's a pictured deck and every card has a picture, there's so much symbolism within these cards, which some of the modern decks lose. Yeah. Because they're great artists, but they're not particularly great tarot enthusiasts. Right. And the symbolism disappears.
So with something like the Rider-Waite, it's all still there.
There's a lot of symbolism still in there. Yeah.
And the Lovers, there's another
interesting card again for me. A lot of symbolism going on here. You've got the Snake of Wisdom. I mean, you could look at this as Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden if you were very Christian-minded. But the Snake of Wisdom, the apples on the tree representing maybe the senses, the 5 senses. Adam, if you like, if we'll call him, he seems to have a burning bush behind him. Now, if you count, there's 12 of those, maybe the signs of the zodiac.
Oh, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, I like to think of this card, yes, it can, on its very base level, can represent maybe, I don't know, the start of a new relationship or a marriage, you know. But also, it can represent a person looking to their other half. I don't mean their physical other half, their internal other half. So maybe their female side if they're male, or their male side if they're female, and through that other side, their animus or anima, contacting their higher self, the angel.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting that the guy looks towards the female figure and only she looks towards the angel. I mean, it's an interesting idea. I don't really know what other people think about that, but it's an interesting thought.
Let's have a little look lastly before we go to the break at the Fool.
Love this card. Well, I mean, this is the card of the tarot, I think. I mean, very often the major arcana cards can be seen as the Fool's journey through the tarot. And many people talk about the Fool's journey through these experiences, through the major arcana. And I kind of agree, but I also believe that he can start like there at 0 and then go 1, 2, 3, 4 through the 21 cards going up this way, or he could start the other way if you look at it, entering the world. The world is the 21st card, and going back that way towards spiritual enlightenment.
Right.
Maybe. It's a thought. Certainly with the story that I've written to teach the major, because what I've done with the major arcana is I've written a story in order to teach it. So I've took the idea of a fairy tale and I've written a fairy tale about our hero and his experiences with each individual in the major arcana as he meets them, which I personally think is a very old way of teaching. I think all fairy tales taught us something, and I think it's a very good way of teaching because everybody remembers a fairy tale.
They do, don't they?
You know, so,
absolutely.
So that's what I've done.
So after the break, you're going to give me a short reading and tell us a little bit about the kind of layouts that people can use.
Different spreads.
If they're having a spread for a reading. Okay,
definitely.
Great. Looking forward to that. So join us after the break. Welcome back. I'm here with Garry Andrews and we're talking all about the tarot. And I mentioned before the break that you're going to give me a sample reading shortly, which will be very exciting, I'm sure. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about the kind of spreads that you may use with people, kind of layouts?
Certainly. So first of all, I suppose we should just say that many readers don't use any sorts of spreads. They simply just lay the cards out. And there are many different rituals and ways of doing these things. And you've got to find the one that suits you. For instance, there are some tarot readers that will not allow clients to handle their cards, for instance. I'm not one of those. I like my clients to handle the cards and to get their energy on the cards before I start the reading. But there are also many rituals. Some clients like the cards to be split into packs and then put back together again in a certain way, and then maybe split again and a deck chosen. All these things are different rituals and ways for the tarot reader, I think, to begin to get into the right zone. For me, it's simply this. Right. I pop this ring on, I'm ready to read. That's my, if you like, my on switch. Right. As I've trained my mind to that. So you can switch off from everyday life, what's going on, to you tuning in to somebody else. Pop the ring on, I'm in the zone, if you like. Okay. Yeah. But some spreads that you may see, a simple, for instance, 3-card draw might simply be that the tarot card reader draws 3 cards, and this could be the past, the present, and the future. Yeah. Or, which would be more likely with me, I would allow you to draw those cards. Yeah. Being as it's your past, present, and future we're talking about. So that's a 3-card draw. You may also see another spread if you have a specific question, this is one that I like for specific questions, where I would get you to draw me 7 cards. So we'd put them in this particular pattern. Now, the 3 bottom cards would be working against you, and the 3 upper cards working for you. And then we'd have a central card in the middle, which would give us, hopefully, the answer. And that should be our answer card. So that's a possible way of using the 7 card spread. And I should say there are hundreds. And even with the same design, many tarot readers will have different meanings for the spaces, for the positions. Yeah?
And that's all about you developing as a reader.
Definitely, yes, without a doubt, yes.
And working with your own intuition, your own guidance.
Yes, what's right for you. Probably the most popular deck reading you'll see, and it usually appears in most tarot decks in their little white book.
Oh, right, yes, come along with the deck.
Is this one, which is called the Celtic Cross. Now, again, this is another thing that lots of tarot readers love to hate. They'll go, oh no, it's the Celtic Cross, you know, so old hat, you know. And you get all this, but I love this spread, and it's the one I use most. So I'm a bit of a traditionalist, really, I guess. And you lay the cards out like so. Now, sometimes you can have a card which the person is called a significator card, which is a card which represents the client.
Right.
Some readers do that. We haven't discussed that. I don't tend to do that, in all honesty. Usually, there are times when I do, but most of the time I don't. So this would be my position 1. This would be my position 2. So this is where you are now. This would be obstacles.
Okay.
Crossing you. Your base card for me represents sort of the basis of the reading, if you like, what you stand on, its foundation. This would be the past. This would be the immediate future. This would be the crown card, which might represent perhaps one of the outcomes, or maybe the highest you could possibly achieve in the situation at the moment. This one would represent the self and how you are now. So that is slightly different from this one, which represents where you are now. This is you, how you are now, so how you feel, or what's going on with you particularly. The home life, or the environment around you. Your hopes and fears. And finally, the outcome. So that's a possible one way of looking at the Celtic Cross spread.
There's quite a lot of detail in there, isn't there? Covering lots of aspects of what's going on.
Yeah, it can be.
In somebody's life.
And that's only if you use positional interpretation. If you free yourself from that, which in fairness quite often I do, and don't worry about the position of the cards, I would tend to look for elemental dominance. So which element dominates this reading would be quite important to me. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 1 cards. So 1 seem to dominate this particular reading. That is backed up by the next one. Most often would be the Pentacles. So we'd look at, if this was a reading, we'd be looking mainly at the work and the finances of the person's life.
Okay.
Yeah, for me.
Yes.
How I do it.
Yeah.
We've got water to the past there, but that's quite weak. So yeah, I would look for elemental dominance first, see what area of the person's life we're really focusing in on, and then we would go into reading the individual cards, maybe bringing in the positional stuff, maybe not. I can be quite fluid with how I read. Sometimes I might just pick that whole lot up, lay them out in a straight line and do something completely different with them. I like the fluidity of that.
Yeah.
But if you're learning, when you're very early stages, it's good to have a spread to give you format
and give you a
something
focus
to work to and from.
So how do you look after your cards? I mean, obviously you wouldn't just put that pack of cards in your back pocket and get on the bus, for example.
No, they wouldn't have lasted 38 years if I had, I don't think. So no, probably wouldn't do that. There are ways, and some I think are quite important, and perhaps others not so much. But again, it comes down to personal choice and
Yeah.
how you feel about it. For instance, for me, this piece of black silk here, my cards are wrapped in black silk. That's my first stage of protecting them. Now, natural things like silk tend to block energy, psychic energy, chi, whatever you want to look at it. So this is a good cleaner for your cards. It's keeping them clean of picking up too much psychic dirt, if you like.
Yeah.
Because I'm the type of tarot card reader who likes my clients to handle the cards, so I want your energy on them. When I finished with your reading, obviously I don't want your energy on them anymore.
So using this kind of clears that
for me.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I then place mine inside a protective bag. I mean, that's useful because if I'm taking them anywhere, that's an easy way to carry them.
Yeah.
Wrapped in the cloth and in a protective bag.
Yeah.
At home, they then sit inside this rather nice wooden box, which gives them even more protection and safety. Not just from psychic energy that might be floating around, but also physically. It protects them from getting knocked, wet, so on and so forth. So for me, that's the way I protect the cards. And I think if you do nothing else, at least get yourself a piece of natural material. It could be cotton, I suppose, if you wanted, but silk is traditional.
Yeah.
And wrap them in a piece of natural silk.
Okay.
But I would advocate a bag, and I would advocate a box.
In the box.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, what sort of reading are you going to do for me then, Garry?
Well, I thought we'd try a nice 5-card reading, just a daily reading.
Okay.
To see how
Sounds
your
good
day's
to me.
been and how your day's likely to pan out as we go on through the day. So what I'm going to do is I'll give these a quick shuffle first, and then I'm going to hand them to you and ask you to do the same. So they are old and they are quite sticky, but you should be able to get them shuffled.
As you can see, I'm not particularly good at shuffling. I'd never have made a croupier.
It's more about your energy in any case, to be honest, for me, getting your energy on the cards.
Yeah. Okay. That feels right to me.
Brilliant. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread them out. I'm used to a much bigger table. You probably worked that out. Spread them out in front of you like so. Normally I would have gone whoosh and a big fan. Very fancy. And get you to draw me out 5 cards. Now draw them out one at a time and hand them to me as you draw them out.
Okay.
Okay. And as you see, as I took those cards, I placed them underneath the first card. That keeps them in the right order when I deal them out. Otherwise they'd have been reversed.
Of course.
Yeah. Then I would pick these up and move them to one side. And we lay these cards out. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. And pop this fella in the middle. Okay, so again I would immediately look for elemental dominance. Well, major arcana is dominating that reading just. With a 5-card reading, it's not so important because obviously there's not enough cards to give us a really good sense of dominance, and we're only talking about a daily look, if you like. So, seems to me your basis for today was family. They seem to be uppermost on your mind, which is here in the 2 of Cups, basis of your card. Okay. Your morning, well, that was a bit of a struggle, it appeared. You were trying to deal with lots of things. You were dealing with hard factual matters, so having to get on and do physical things and deal with people communications wise, but also there was this hangover of an emotional thing from the morning, something to do with your family.
Right, okay.
Seem to hang over. Would that be?
Yeah, that would be accurate. Yeah.
Good, okay. And then you seem to go into a period where, round lunchtime, where you struggled for a balance. You were in like this. You were trying to get that balance between, actually I'm at work and I need to get on with it, but there's still this nagging thing going on, something to do with your family. It's still there, nagging away in the head.
Okay.
And then we moved into afternoon. Well, you're sat with me, so I kind of know what the afternoon's like. But this is very much, actually, looking at this card, I've got to say, you're feeling a little restless.
Am I?
Well, looking at this, I would say you've kind of had enough for today, and we wouldn't mind going home.
Garry.
Outcome for today seems quite balanced, actually. I don't think there's going to be any major issues today for you at all. Not this evening at all. Evening looks fine. So this is how I move through the day with this reading. I move from morning to mid-morning, afternoon time. I'm quite fluid with it. I don't tend to say this is this and this is this and that is that and this is this. I let the cards tell me what is going on. Evening for you looks fine. You're actually quite busy by looking at this, but it's very balanced. And actually tonight is very much about energy. So what's going on tonight? What are you doing tonight? Tonight
we're filming the first part of a show about spirits in people's houses.
Well, there we are. Energy. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So that kind of gives you an idea of a daily reading.
And that's very accurate.
Not something I would particularly do very often. I have to say.
I can see, a danger of people perhaps picking out 5 cards in the morning when they get up to try and work out what their day is going to be like.
Yeah, it isn't something I would advocate. You can get people that get so hooked on any form of divination, they won't make a move without it, and that's just plain silly. Also, as a reader, you can get clients that get so hooked into you as a reader that they won't make a move without speaking to you, and you've really got to discourage that. I will not have that. If I feel a client is getting to that point, I will gently try to persuade them that that is not the way to run your life, because it isn't.
No.
Divination is a useful tool, but it's only ever, at best, I should think 75% accurate. You're always going to make mistakes. Anything that comes through a human being is open to interpretation, and you can make interpretative mistakes. Nobody other than the divine knows everything. So you can't allow clients to get that hooked in to what you do, and you've really got to discourage that. Having said that, you've also got to be a bit like a priest, really. You ought to be privy to your clients' innermost secrets a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you must be ethical, which means you don't talk about readings that you've done for a person to somebody else. That's something that goes on between you and a client is private, personal, and you must remain and keep it private and personal, no matter what is said. So there's quite a lot of ethical areas around the tarot. You've also got to think about if you're going to go into doing it professionally or even semi-professionally, and there's a lot of responsibility.
And I think that's a really good point to end on there, is the ethical side of it. And it's been absolutely fascinating. We've learnt so much this afternoon. We've learnt about the different spreads and the layouts that you can use the tarot for, the difference between the major and the minor arcana, the different cards that can be used, how the styles have changed over the years. I mean, what a lot of information you hold. Thank you so much,
My
Garry.
pleasure.
It's been brilliant, and we can't wait for the book to come out and continue teaching.
Good.
So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Claire.
So I hope you've enjoyed this afternoon as much as I have, and I hope you've enjoyed watching a reading. And all the show notes and details of Garry's book will be on www.thelightenenergychannel.tv, and of course you can join us on Facebook too. So, enlighten energy from me, Claire Wiles. Goodbye.